Tonight on CBC Vancouver News. Watching picket lines.
They've been standing around and filming us and, to be honest, making us feel incredibly unsafe.
SFU hires and then drops a private security firm brought in to monitor teaching staff on strike. Plus, calls for more security.
We have to understand how raw and how in pain our community is.
Some members of Metro Vancouver's Jewish community are asking for more protection amid the violence in Israel and Gaza. And many homes to help those without homes.
At this stage, we're willing to try anything innovative that will help people stay housed.
And they're coming to Kelowna.
This is CBC Vancouver News.
Good evening, I'm Dan Burritt. Thanks for joining us. Simon Fraser University has now ended its contract with a controversial private security firm it hired to monitor teaching staff who were on strike. Their union says their members were photographed and filmed by private investigators while on the picket lines. As Michelle Gassoub reports, they're now demanding answers from the university.
At SFU's Burnaby campus, teaching staff have been on the picket lines for 2 weeks, demanding cost of living adjustments and pensions for their sessional instructors. It was at this picket line that teaching assistants started to feel like something was off. They'd noticed individuals who seemed to be watching them.
These odd characters watching us, following us from campus to campus, taking pictures of us, recording video.
They started asking questions.
Who's paying you to be here?
I don't know.
You don't know.
I'm asked to be here, and that's what I do.
Okay, what's your name?
Lionsgate.
SFU said it hired Lionsgate Risk Management Group to monitor picket line activity. The group is a security risk management firm. It says online its employees have command and control experience for major labor disputes and knowledge in subversive, terrorist, and activist practices. It was previously hired to surveil protesters at Fairy Creek on Vancouver Island and to protect the Trans Mountain Pipeline.
I have no idea what security threat they're getting from us. They've been standing around and filming us and, to be honest, making us feel incredibly unsafe.
SFU said it hired the group because of reports of intimidation and entryways being blocked. But those on strike say it was the firm's presence at their picket lines that made them feel unsafe.
To treat us like criminals, to treat us like we're some kind of threat to this community that we love so much, it's genuinely unbelievable.
SFU said no one was available for an interview. Hours later, it said it had ended the contract with the firm and would be reassessing how it hires for security contracts in the future.
To have literal private investigators following us around and treating us like we're awful when we're just teachers that love what we do.
The union is asking that all documents pertaining to the group's hiring be shared and that all footage of union members on the picket line be destroyed. Negotiations between the two sides remain ongoing. Michelle Gassoub, CBC News, Burnaby.
The Supreme Court of Canada says it will not hear an appeal from the Hells Angels over properties the BC government seized from the motorcycle gang in Kelowna, Nanaimo, and Vancouver. The decision was in response to an appeal by the Hells Angels and ends a 16-year legal saga over the three clubhouses. The BC government initially moved to seize the first in 2007, citing an act meant to prevent unlawful activity and harmful use of property. The province can now sell the three properties under the Civil Forfeiture Act. It is Fire Safety Awareness Week in our province, and officials have launched an education campaign to try to stop a trend of fire-related deaths. Over the past 5 years, the number of fire-related fatalities has risen more than 200%, 86 reported last year. Some of that increase is tied to the pandemic when more people earlier on were at home. Officials say some blazes were started by kitchen fires, smoking, or open flames.
What we find even more concerning is year over year, the statistics aren't changing. And in 2022, only 42% of the time of all reported structure fires was there working smoke alarms. Working smoke alarms save lives. 50% chance greater to save your life if you have a working smoke alarm.
You are being urged to check your smoke alarms at least twice a year, and if you don't have one, contact your local fire department. 2 Canadian sailors were rescued by the U.S. Coast Guard this week, about 150 kilometers off the coast of Washington State. A helicopter crew from Air Station Astoria were called in to help 2 men in a sinking vessel. They say they had a broken propeller, ripped sails, and a dead generator. And part of their rescue was caught on video. Vancouver is one of the most expensive places to live in Canada. Many call it unaffordable, and increasingly so. But a new survey finds the city is also home to 72 centimillionaires. And as Saurabh Sandhu shows us, there's a rising concern about the growing income divide here.
Luxury brands, extravagant cars, and monster mansions on the ocean. Vancouver has long said to be home of some of the richest on the planet. And now it's official. The city has been ranked 41st in the list of top 50 of the rich, with 72 centimillionaires. Those are the millionaires who possess investable assets of more than 100 million US dollars. The report has been published by Hanley & Partners, an investment migration consultancy firm. The region is also home to 6 billionaires, according to the report. The reaction on the street, a mix of envy and more.
It would not surprise me at all.
Wow, that's a rich city.
Wow. Okay, how about sharing with the rest of us?
The report is projecting a 67% growth in the number of centimillionaires over the next decade. However, experts say the report does not mean people in the city are making more money.
Much of this wealth isn't necessarily made locally, but is being moved into the city and to a great deal moved into residential real estate.
It's clear that it's a highly desirable environment to be in. People do come here, they bring their wealth with them. They come from other regions of the world in order to settle down here, have a lifestyle that they enjoy near the mountains, near the ocean.
Andy Yan says the report only confirms Vancouver's role as a hedge city.
In an era of instability, whether that be political, economic, or even climatic, that Vancouver does have that role of attracting that kind of wealth.
With rising housing prices, he says income inequality remains a major challenge for the city.
It really highlights the ongoing need and public policy gap in terms of progressive taxation on wealth. That I think that this isn't an issue of income, that is those who are working a job in metropolitan Vancouver, but the massive and sizable disparities when it comes to wealth, whether it be local or global.
Toronto is the only other Canadian city in the list, with 192 centimillionaires and 18 billionaires. New York topped the list with more than 750 centimillionaires and 62 billionaires. Saurabh Sandhu, CBC News, Vancouver.
To a very different kind of housing story now. The city of Kelowna is trying to help people without homes there by building mini homes. 120 new 60-square-foot mini units will be put up in the next 3 months there as part of a signed memorandum of understanding, a commitment to better support Kelowna citizens who are unhoused and to help prevent future encampments.
You know, at this stage, we're willing to try anything innovative that will help people stay housed, because that's the ultimate goal. We don't want people to go in and go out. And so there's an interest, a growing interest internationally at this type of model. And Kelowna said, hey, we want to try it. And so we're willing to partner with them to try it.
The city took inspiration from Washington State's tiny homes. Similar homes have also been seen in Victoria and Duncan, but this is the first time the units will be tested in a colder winter climate. Vancouver has a long history of talking up its potential, often comparing itself to cities like Hong Kong and London, among others. But how do those comparisons do they hold merit? Justin McElroy has a look after the issue was revived this week by Mayor Ken Sim.
This week, Vancouver's mayor was asked how he was going to meet his ambitious targets for development around the city's village centres and SkyTrain stations, and he invoked the 3 magic words.
We put it out there, and now that it's out there, we will develop the plan. Look, we've built incredible things in this city, in this province, in this country before. We're talking about building a world-class city.
There it is, world-class city. It's a phrase Vancouver loves, but we're often confused what it means to be world-class. Maybe it's having a 10K race. Maybe it's transit. Maybe it's having more transit to keep us world-class. Maybe it doesn't involve ultimate fighting or concerts, and maybe we don't need it at all. Whatever the case may be, it's a handy thing for mayors to say.
Vancouver is going to be the best city on the planet.
It's the type of statement that can never be backed up by quantifiable evidence they can then be held accountable by, which may be why Sim said that instead of answering the question.
So I can't answer your question, but what I can't in detail, but what I can tell you is we're going to define the problem, and then we will provide the adequate resources to make sure that plan happens.
And when that day comes, about the only guarantee is Vancouver will still be debating whether it's world class or not. Justin McElroy, CBC News, Vancouver.
Megaphone magazine has now released its annual Hope in Shadows calendar. Publishers say the aim of the photography project is to share stories of people living in extreme poverty through their own lens. This year, 150 downtown Eastside community members took part using disposable cameras to capture their lives. The theme was a beautiful day in the neighborhood, where participants were asked to take images of beauty all around them. More than 2,500 photos were voted on for the summer.
Just, you know, my mom's gonna get the calendar, like everyone I know is gonna, well, most of them get the calendar, you know. So it's gonna be a nice surprise.
The calendar will be sold to low-income vendors for $10, and they will then offer it to buyers for $20 and get to keep the profit. We'll turn on your phone alerts. For the first time in decades, North Americans will have a chance to see a rare ring of fire eclipse on Saturday. Solar eclipses happen when the moon moves directly in front of the sun. This one is special because you will still be able to see the edges of the sun peeking out from behind the moon, hence the name. But don't look at it with your naked eyes. If you head out, be sure to put on eclipse eyewear or use a pinhole projector. Darius Madavi, do you have a pinhole projector?
I don't, but there's a great video on CBC's site where you can learn how to make one, which I just found out when I Googled how to make one. And that came up. So it was great.
Yeah. Get everything you need here. Well, that'll be
Exactly.
interesting to see, provided you have protection.
Yes, and provided that the weather cooperates, because it might be cloudy, which is unfortunate, because this is the best place in Canada to see it this time around. This is a really spectacular type of eclipse because the moon is at its furthest point from Earth, or close to it, which means that, as Dan said, we have less of this, or some of the sun actually visible even when the eclipse is fully happening. So across Canada, you're going to be able to see at least some of the eclipse, but BC has it better than anywhere else. In Vancouver and Victoria, anywhere from 75 to 80% of the sun will be covered, which means we get as close to the ring of fire effect as you're going to get here. If you're along this line in the States, that's where you get, and down to South America, actually, that's where you get the full ring of fire effect. But better than anywhere else in Canada, see it right here in BC. So that's good news, provided the weather cooperates once again. So we see some of that, the eclipse start early on Friday, 8 a.m. or so Pacific time, and that's when you can start to see it. The peak here in Vancouver will be at around 9:20, but you see all this cloud that's happening all up and down BC's coast. Anything that's gray here is cloud, so maybe not going to be the best view after all, but your best chance is to face east or southeast and just really hope for the best as that maximal eclipse, 75 to 80%, passes right through. So fingers crossed, and we'll check in again tomorrow.
Sounds great. Thanks, Darius.
Thanks, Dan.
To Israel now, where Canadian flights have been evacuating citizens and families after the deadly attack launched by Hamas militants last weekend. We're going to have more on that in a moment. First, though, the CBC's Paul Hunter went to one of the locations that Hamas militants attacked on Saturday, where at least 260 people were killed. It's a site close to the border of the Gaza Strip.
This is the scene of that rave last Saturday where so many Israelis were massacred. The Israeli Defense Force has allowed journalists in today to look around at what's left, and it is almost undescribable. Even as we speak, there's what seems to be artillery fire. Fighter jets have been going overhead. There's been explosions just off in the distance. We're very close to the Gaza Strip here, where Hamas came and killed. Everywhere you look, there are destroyed cars. There are bullet holes everywhere, broken glass, of course. There's blood in the sand still, all over the place, burnt out cars. What's striking is the scale. It goes on and on and on. There were so many people here, chased down, murdered. 260 people were killed here. The bodies have been taken away. This is so that we can see. The whole place is a testament to the horror of what happened. Everything trashed as all those lives were destroyed and ended. It is nauseating. Paul Hunter, CBC News, just outside the Gaza Strip.
Paul Hunter reporting from Israel. Now, the first two Canadian evacuation flights took off from Tel Aviv today, bound for Athens. And more Canadian military flights are scheduled over the next several days. As Kate McKenna reports, officials say about 800 people have asked for assistance to get out of Israel.
In a sea of people desperate to get out of Israel, this is a welcome sight for some Canadians in the crowd.
We're sending these Canadians home, the tourists home, because we think that risk exists.
This family got the call and packed up.
We were at the lawyer's office and quickly finished that up, went home and picked up the luggage and came here.
Additional airlines announced they're suspending flights from Tel Aviv, and officials say they've seen a surge in Canadians wanting to leave. More than 275 left today, after days of horror and uncertainty.
Missiles were intercepted overhead, directly overhead, that we spent a great deal of time in the bomb shelter, and one of our sons was almost paralyzed with anxiety because of the situation and had to be reassured quite constantly.
Robin Cox was in Israel for her nephew's wedding.
We were of mixed feelings because my husband's family are all here, and we came for a very, very large and joyful celebration, and we know that we're leaving them behind.
Canadian officials say at least 2 flights per day will leave until everyone who wants to leave Israel can. But they say they can't help the 100 people in Gaza who've asked for assistance unless a humanitarian corridor opens.
We are working very hard with all of our allies and friends and partners who want to see peace returned to the region, want to see civilian lives protected. This is an unbelievably difficult situation.
Canadians have started to arrive in Athens on those flights from Tel Aviv. The government says it'll help passengers find hotels and book an Air Canada flight at their own expense. The first one is expected to arrive tomorrow in Toronto. Kate McKenna, CBC News, Ottawa.
A former Hamas leader is calling for a day of action, sparking concern any potential violence could spread, including here in Canada. Members of the Jewish community on the Lower Mainland are calling for increased security. While CBC News has no confirmation there is a threat to people here in BC, there will be police presence at synagogues and Jewish schools. In a statement, BC Public Safety Minister Mike Farnworth says British Columbia will never be a place for hate, violence, or the support of terrorism. We stand in solidarity with the Jewish community, and we are here to support you.
What we're hearing from community members around the threats is that this is another piece of the puzzle. We have to understand how raw and how in pain our community is and how much hurt. We lost an individual that went to school right across from where you're filming right now. I knew him. I sat with his family. We know these people. This is very intimate.
Shankin says the community has not seen any direct threats of violence, but is advising caution. We'll have more on the story after the break. And coming up, we will hear from Gabor Mate, a trauma expert and Holocaust survivor. His point of view on how the Israel-Gaza region got to this point after this. Thanks for watching our commercial-free live stream tonight. Fast footwork and storytelling is all part of the classic Indian dance, an Indian dance. A Kathak dancer from Newfoundland explains the origins and influences and how she incorporates Western movements.
So Kathak is a dance form that originates from the north part of India, what we now recognize politically, the northern part of that region. But, you know, it has many different influences. So India itself is such a diverse country that you have so many languages, you have thousands of years of history. So Kathak dance is kind of a combination of a number of elements, that there were temple dances that existed in India, in South India, Eastern India, and then Kathak emerged out of the influences of the Mughals who came from what is now Central Asia. And with them, they brought their own style of music, their own clothing style, their religion, and all those influences sort of colored the dance form that we see. So the signature elements of Kathak dance are the spins, or what we call the chakkars, and the very fast percussive footwork that happens, and we wear bells on our feet to bring out that percussive element. For Kathak dance, we have bigger hoop skirts because we're doing spins, and so the costumes are designed to bring out the beauty of that dance form. It's interesting, you know, when we talk about what is Canadian, because I grew up in Canada. I've lived here all my life. I am a Canadian citizen, and I actually grew up and I started learning Indian dance in St. John's, Newfoundland, through the Hindu Temple of St. John's. And we had a dance school that operated for many years, and I actually was a teacher there for a few years. And so I've always thought of our dance, our languages, our culture as being Canadian. A lot of the choreography that I do is a mixture of what people perceive as traditional, but I try to also work with dancers of different styles. So one of the pieces that we're doing is based on Kathak and urban dance, so hip-hop language. So it's showing how we have a rhythmic language, we have an aesthetic that isn't just one thing. It can be as contemporary as anything else.
As we mentioned earlier, a former Hamas leader is calling for a day of action tomorrow, and some here in Canada are concerned. Jamie Strachan tells us how police are responding and their message for those stoking fear.
Jewish communities in Canada and around the world are on edge.
Our communities have spoken clearly that they don't feel safe, and we are being responsive to that concern.
After a former Hamas leader called for a day of action Friday. In Toronto, command posts set up in the heart of this predominantly Jewish neighborhood. as police in the city and across the country step up patrols, though they say there have been no credible threats. And in Montreal, the Jewish General Hospital is encouraging the cancellation of non-essential appointments.
And hopefully, Montrealers, we can resist together, to this hatred that is happening.
Precautions are also being taken at Jewish institutions across Europe and the United States. Back in Toronto, police arrested 3 men, the hate crime unit now investigating after alleged threats outside of a Jewish school.
I hope tomorrow will be an opportunity for us to test the safety and security that we feel here in Canada.
Some parents with children at Jewish day schools are keeping them home Friday, but Maya Roth's 4 children will be in class.
They need structure. They need a sense of normalcy during these times.
Rabbi Jared Grover has been working directly with Toronto police. He says fear and anxiety are warranted, but he has been counseling resiliency.
You don't cower. You stand up to police. I am sending my children to school tomorrow. I have young children in Jewish day schools. I'm encouraging my friends to send their children to school.
The same concern in Muslim communities, where police are also increasing their presence.
The idea that you have to be protected as you simply go to a mosque for prayer is something it's not comforting. It's unfathomable. It shouldn't be happening in Canada.
A shared emotion as a war happening a world away is felt in communities across the country. Jamie Strachan, CBC News, Toronto.
As the Israel-Hamas conflict continues, the United Nations World Food Program is warning that supplies are running low in the Gaza Strip after Israel imposed a total blockade on that territory after Saturday's deadly attack by Hamas militants. The combined death toll of Israelis and Palestinians has now topped 2,000. To explain how the region got to this point and the context of trauma, CBC News spoke with Gabor Mate, a Hungarian-Canadian doctor and trauma expert. He's also a Holocaust survivor. He joined CBC's Stephen Quinn on the early edition this morning to share his point of view.
The context is the longest ethnic cleansing operation in the 20th and 21st centuries. And the Palestinians have suffered such oppression, such brutality. Tens of thousands have been killed by the Israelis since 1948. Hundreds of children have been massacred by bombs within the last 10 years, last 15 years. The Israeli historian, or I should say sociologist Baruch Kimmerling, called Gaza the world's largest concentration camps. And recently, 2,000 Israeli and Jewish academics around the world signed a paper saying that what's going on in the West Bank is apartheid. And none of that is reported in the Western press. So I was there with my own eyes a year ago. There's nothing to justify these atrocities that happened last week. But I'm telling you, if we're going to move forward, if we're going to create peace, if we're going to deal with all this trauma, we have to understand what's going on. And we have to understand that the Palestinian side has suffered such indignity and such oppression that, as the Israeli journalist Gideon Levy wrote in Haaretz, an Israeli newspaper 2 days ago, is that you can't keep 2 million people prisoner and not expect a cruel response. And that's the situation, and that's the context in which I, as a Jewish person, who 3 of my kids spent a year in Israel and studying. I've been there a number of times. I'm heartbroken for everybody, but at the same time, I just wish that people saw the overall reality. This did not have to happen.
We have traumatic events like this, Gabor, that are just so deeply politicized, and as you say, they're so rooted in history. It may feel as though one group is downplaying or diminishing the feelings of others because of their own views. What are your thoughts on that?
Unfortunately, it's true. I heard a wonderful Jewish academic and very religious Jew, Peter Baynard, talking the other day, and he's also heartbroken. And he said that in his community, the way that Jews identify with each other is to be wishing violence and revenge on the Palestinians. And I'm sure the same is true on the other side as well, for many people. It's so difficult for people not just to identify with their own particular ethnic group, but actually feel like human beings, feel as human beings. What if we woke up tomorrow morning, all of us, not as identifying as this, that, or the other, but as human beings. Would we do any of these things to each other? And the historical trauma just keeps magnifying over there, and the outcome, the future is horrendous as far as I'm concerned. Unless, and I have to tell you that I'm so upset at Canadian politicians who just reflexively parrot the line that, you know, we have to support Israel's right to defense. Well, sure, every country has the right to defend itself. But does the country have the right to oppress and brutalize? And there's been 250 Palestinian deaths this year in the West Bank. The Western press does not report that.
Yes, when you talk about waking up this morning, I could not imagine waking up to rockets being fired into my neighborhood and getting the news that my children had been killed at a music festival or had been kidnapped and dragged across the border.
It's horrible. One cannot but be both outraged and heartbroken about it. At the same time, do you hear when Palestinian kids are shot and killed in the West Bank? Does the television show those reports? Do we go into, when Israel has bombed Gaza and has killed hundreds of children within 2 weeks? No, I don't mean this time, I mean previously. Do we go into Gaza and hear the individual stories and laments of those individuals? So all I'm asking is for the truth, that we should look at the whole picture.
Physician and trauma expert Gabor Mate speaking with the CBC's Stephen Quinn this morning. Now, as some Canadians flee Israel and others try to flee Gaza, many will understandably be traumatized by the violence. The Vancouver Association of Survivors for Survivors of Torture says it is always preparing to help those coming to this country. We spoke with the executive director on BC Today earlier this afternoon. He says the destruction in Israel and Gaza goes beyond those who are there. Are you hearing from any survivors of violence who are being triggered or impacted by what's happening in Israel on the Gaza Strip right now?
Absolutely.
And what are they telling you, if I can ask?
Sure. I mean, how many anecdotes can we go into in a short time? Not very many, but you know, one thing that I can certainly share is that there is a sense of solidarity and there is a sense of empathy among different people who have survived, whether it's a terrorist attack or decades of systematic oppression and exclusion. From the benefits of the broader society that they live in, there is a sense of solidarity and of understanding and of connectedness. And that's one of the things that we find and that the research really backs up, is that actually really assists with the recovery and rehabilitation process, is to have those bonds of solidarity. Not that somebody else's suffering makes us feel better, but that we can feel more connected and we can feel more of a link and more of a collective movement towards healing. We have a phrase that we use in VAST, which is healing is an act of resistance. This refers not to violent or armed resistance, because we would never indicate that two wrongs make a right, or that you know, one war crime justifies other war crimes. However, that it's resistance against the processes that created the need for that healing in you in the first place.
The man accused of killing a Muslim family in Ontario appeared in court today. The latest on that legal battle and a look back at the tragic crime after the break.
Farmers often have trouble getting enough help to bring in the harvest, but some farmers on Vancouver Island are having the opposite problem. They can't keep the pickers off their land. The pickers are after hallucinogenic mushrooms. Possession of the so-called magic mushrooms is not against the law, but as Colin Hoth reports, the farmers wish it were.
Thousands of young people have come from across Canada to search the pasture lands of the West Coast for this particular species of mushroom. Among drug users, it's popular now as an organic drug. In the dried state, it's selling for as much as $25 a gram. But BC's farmers say the pickers are spoiling their crops and endangering livestock. On Vancouver Island, Dieter Doberstein is organizing the petition demanding new legislation. He says he's taken to patrolling his farm by night with a shotgun since pickers threatened to burn his building. He's urging neighbors to follow his lead and arrest trespassers.
Leave me alone, man. You are under arrest. Oh, stay! You can't tie me up now.
Well, we've been approached by 3 groups, and we've been offered $10,000 by each one just for the picking right.
Why don't you accept it?
Well, I just don't want to be part of the drug scene. We'd like to have a possession of the wet mushroom made to be illegal, then the police can pick those fellows up when they suspect them. They can pick them up any place. Now it's up to me to charge them for trespassing and for mischief. It's up to me to lay the charge. And I don't think that I'm a policeman. That's not my job.
The RCMP say they're swamped with complaints. They are worried about the possibility of violence, but say they just don't have the manpower to control the situation.
We all been practicing for a year on how to run, so you know we're all.
I figure there should be no big deal because people travel 4,000 miles to come just pick mushrooms, man. They should be more friendlier because if nobody's really hurting them because it's just grass you're walking on. You're not,
These 3 pickers ended up with a 5-day jail sentence for trespassing, with a warning from the judge in Courtenay that the next group of offenders could expect even stiffer penalties. Colin Holt, CBC News on Vancouver Island.
The man charged with murder and terrorism offenses in the deadly attack on a Muslim family testified in court today. Nathaniel Veltman hit the family with his truck in London in June of 2021. 4 people were killed, a 9-year-old boy, the only survivor. As Thomas Dagler reports, Veltman was the defense's first witness.
Nathaniel Veltman appeared nervous but spoke clearly, answering questions from his lawyer and sometimes looking at the jury seated near him in the courtroom. Veltman testified about what he described as his fundamentalist Christian upbringing. The now 22-year-old was homeschooled in small-town Strathroy, Ontario, and recalled in court his mother punishing him frequently and preventing him from seeing other children she considered unchristian. Veltman said, "I turned into this cauldron of rage and secretly hated her." He left the family home at age 16. He's now facing charges of terrorism-motivated murder after running over the Ufzal family with his pickup truck in June 2021. After the Crown presented its case, today defense lawyer Christopher Hicks made his opening statement, telling jurors the intention to kill was not formed and there was no planning and deliberation.
We're disputing the intention involved in these matters, okay? The criminal intent that's necessary for these charges.
The jury was previously shown video of the accused telling police he targeted Muslims and that in his words it wasn't just murder but terrorism. The court also heard last month that Veltman had taken magic mushrooms the day before the attack. The defense's next witness is expected to be a forensic psychiatrist set to testify about the impact of hallucinogenic substances. Thomas Dagg, CBC News, Toronto.
Also in Ontario, a criminal investigation is underway looking at how the Ford government handled its Greenbelt plan. Our Lorenda Redekop heard from a retired Mountie about how things are likely to unfold and what charges could be laid.
At a minimum, it's going to be 12 to 18 months.
Gary Clement is a retired RCMP officer and has worked on cases involving government. With the Greenbelt investigation, he says there will be lots of evidence to pore over and many people to interview, including landowners who were set to benefit from land being opened up for housing, before Premier Doug Ford reversed that.
Whether they cooperate or not will be yet to remain to be seen. So I tend to think there'll be some roadblocks put up, because if there is some wrongdoing, nobody's going to come forward.
He says potential charges could be breach of trust or fraud, more complex than some.
You've got $1,000 sitting on the table and somebody comes and scoops it from you and you don't know it, that's theft. It's pretty black and white. Unfortunately, we're talking about politics and politicians, and it becomes far more convoluted than that.
The OPP investigated the Liberals' gas plant scandal for 2.5 years before laying charges. Former Premier Dalton McGuinty's chief of staff was found guilty and sentenced to jail time.
There's some really questionable things.
The interim Liberal leader says police have more investigative powers compared to the Auditor General and Integrity Commissioner, who've already done their own Greenbelt investigations.
They have the power of subpoena. They have far more access into financial information that may be involved in this outside of government.
Here's why he believes that's important.
Everything up until now has been about protecting the king, protect the premier. And so I think with this investigation, it's going to change over to protect yourself.
I'd like to begin by taking... The Green Party leader wants the RCMP to expand their investigation to include all land deals, including fast-tracking zoning changes, MZOs as they're known. Whether that happens or not, this long timeline for the investigation means this could still be an issue in the next election. Lorenda Redicomp, CBC News, Toronto.
Afghan migrants in Pakistan could face deportation. That's the government's warning for those who are there illegally. It's ominous news for people planning to leave, but who are still waiting for documents. As Rafi Boudjikanian tells us, Canada is one of those destinations.
Pakistan, home to an estimated 1.4 million Afghan migrants. But the country says as of November 1st, it will remove those who are there illegally. And the Afghans have been getting warnings from the UN's migration agency.
They came over to the hotels and they informed us and they told us they might not help us if they catch us.
Mohammad Yunus Nasimi fled the Taliban 2 years ago and sought temporary refuge in Pakistan. A former military contractor with the Canadian Armed Forces, he and his family have been waiting to see if Immigration Canada will approve their trip here on special measures for Afghans who used to work for the Canadian military or government.
We cannot blame anybody for this except the Immigration Office. What is the reason that it's taking them that much long?
Others have already had a brush with the law. We've agreed to hide this Afghan refugee applicant's identity. His brother was briefly arrested by local police on an errand to fetch medication 2 weeks ago.
I got a lot of money, and after 4 to 5 days, we were able to release him back from the jail.
Still, he says that's little reassurance. Visas for many in his family have expired and they cannot afford to renew them.
We don't want to be arrested or captured by the police, especially when our children and families are in hotels and we have nobody else to take care of them.
Refugee advocates say Ottawa must pick up the pace in processing paperwork for migrants, while it teams up with the international community to convince Pakistan to back off.
We have to act to make the deadline not real and urge Pakistan to stand down, but we need to act urgently in the context where the deadline may well be real.
The UN's migration agency says it is instructing migrants to check in with their hotels whenever they leave their rooms. This is not the first time Pakistan has threatened to deport paperless migrants. In the past, Immigration Canada received assurances those who are bound here would only face fines or bans on returning to Pakistan. This time, the department would just say they're in constant contact with Pakistani authorities. Rafi Boudjikanian, CBC News, Ottawa.
October is Latin American Heritage Month. Time to celebrate culture, food, song, and dance. Up next, a look at the Dominican dance, bachata. and how to learn it. Stick around.
Housing advocates in Kings County say taking people to Charlottetown to access services isn't working. The province says 13 people were sent to Park Street Emergency Shelter in August who stated they were from Kings County.
Unfortunately, it compounds the already existing problem that we're facing in Charlottetown.
People who work with the unhoused population in Three Rivers say data is hard to nail down. At last night's meeting, they said demand for services is increasing.
People need to be housed and supported in their community, and if we try to drive everybody to a centralized location, it actually exacerbates an already existing problem, and we're just not set up in Charlottetown to deal with that level.
Redmond also criticized 12-hour models for shelters. He says people need a roof over their head 24 hours a day for basic needs like sleep and nutrition. People struggling to pay for food is something the Montague Food Bank is seeing firsthand.
The food bank is open every Thursday morning from 9 to 11:30. So this was the first Thursday of the month. We had 76 families, which is 224 people. And that's just the beginning of the month.
Dingwell says a shelter should be set up in Three Rivers to help those trying to make ends meet. It's something some in the community have been calling for, but not all. There are worries setting up an emergency shelter in Kings County could bring issues with it.
When I realized what was happening with the outreach center in Charlottetown, it made me really scared. And that is why I'm here tonight, to speak with you. I'm scared.
The meetings are part of a series of public consultations by the Legislative Standing Committee on Health and Social Development.
They can give solutions, they can talk. This is their opportunity to speak directly to a standing committee that can bring these changes forward. We need to know what's going on in your community. We need to know how you feel about the situation, solutions, problems, issues, anything that you want.
The Legislative Committee has 3 more meetings across the province this month. The province says a final report on a community needs assessment in Kings County was recently submitted. That document is expected to be made public within the next month. Tony Davis, CBC News, Charlottetown.
UBC's Latin Dance Club is helping students get the groove on. They're celebrating Latin American Heritage Month with bachata lessons. Our Michelle Gomez joined the fun and learned a few moves.
It's Latin American Heritage Month in Canada, a time to honor and celebrate Latin American community and culture. And a big part of this culture is, of course, Latin dance. Today we're here with the UBC Latin Dance Club, and we are learning bachata, a dance that originated in the Dominican Republic.
Bachata is very sensual, I guess. Also very a slow kind of dance.
It's kind of flirty in a sense. The kind of connections you develop. There's a sort of unspoken chat between the lead and the follow. And it's a special moment that can have different tones depending on who you're dancing with.
You get to know how they move, how they think. I really like that. I really love the music, from bachata to salsa to kizomba. All of them have their own thing about it, their own history that goes with it, and that's one of the things that I really like about it. So much is interconnected with the history and the culture.
At the turn, preparation on 4, count 2 halves, basic, 1, 2, 3, to the couple, 5, 6, 7,
didn't used to dance back when I was in South America. But once I got here, I kind of started missing my culture, and I was missing that sense of community, and I thought like probably here is where I would find people like-minded, because a lot of the culture is imbibed into the music.
Here in Vancouver, you'll find a very big community actually, and it's not just Latin people. It's from every background, any age. If you go to the socials downtown, you'll see literally anyone that you can think of just dancing their hearts out. I would say it's a very big community, but also very welcoming.
Michelle Gomez, CBC News, Vancouver.
So they said, Darius, that bachata is sensuous, flirty, and slow. I'm one of those things, and it's not the first two.
Okay.
That's all we got. But good on Michelle for dancing on camera, right? Who doesn't love doing that?
I could not.
No.
I couldn't do it for myself and for the audience. I don't think anybody wants to see that, trust me.
What about weather? What do they want to see there?
Well, one thing they might want to see, we did improve a little bit again in terms of the drought situation. Much better to see than my dancing. Just a little improvement, not as much as we saw last week. We had quite a big jump, especially here on the south coast last week. This is a pretty minor improvement, mostly confined to the north coast and some of the basins up north, but still improvement is improvement, so we'll take it. Again, we'll check in on where we were at last year at this time, and you can see that we are in not a bad spot. Oh, this is actually the end of October, so let's do that instead, because I didn't have it paused before we started, so that's fine. Compared to the end of October, when we were at pretty much the peak of the drought situation, we're sitting in a fairly similar spot, a little bit worse in some places, a little bit better in others. But whether we're talking about a couple weeks before this, which is where we are right now, this time last year, which was a little bit of improvement, but not much, the big difference here is not how bad the drought situation is. In both cases, it's very unusual for fall. But the really standout thing is here we were getting worse at this time of year, and here we're improving. So a little bit of a better situation right now, but that could change very easily because, again, the situation got worse again at the end of November. Really depends how much rain we continue to get. So hopefully we'll continue to see some more systems roll through as we're about to this weekend, because tomorrow we stay pretty dry across the province until the afternoon at around 4 p.m. We see a system hit the west coast of the island that continues through to us by the late evening, and on the lower mainland we get quite a bit of rain that evening overnight into Saturday. By Saturday morning, though, we've mostly cleared up, so lingering a little bit, and then by noon-ish, we see that rain move out of the way, and then we don't get another dose of it until probably the late afternoon into the evening. So that's when we see the other part of that system roll through, so sort of twin lows. The second one moves through, and then that moves up into the rest of the province, and then we're probably pretty good on Sunday, except for maybe a little bit of rain overnight. But tonight, we're pretty much clear. A little bit of cloud starts to move in tomorrow across some parts of the province, but for the most part, we're still looking sunny until the late afternoon, and even then it's just moving in. And then this weekend is when we really start to see that cloud and that rain move in. So a little bit of rain, but probably not when you're going to be outdoors over the weekend. So that's a little bit nice before the heavy rain starts to come early next week, probably.
Okay. Thank you, Darius.
Thanks, Dan.
Escaping war with music. How a Calgary musician is helping Ukrainians rock out. Stick around for this.
Hey!
A tall 10 Tlingit master carver's life and work will soon be on display at the Kelowna Art Gallery. Wolves, the Art of Dempsey Bob exhibition opens this weekend. It will showcase the artist's development from a young carver in the 1970s in the northwest corner of the province. Bob's collection of masks, sculptures, and vessels will be on display. The gallery says it's the first time that collection has been brought together from private collectors and the vaults of art museums.
I'd like them to show the quality, the quality of our carvings that our ancestors did. And also to learn about our culture, learn about our art. Because culture is very important, because culture is what makes us human.
The exhibition will run from October 14th until mid-February of next year. A Calgary man is on a unique humanitarian mission for Ukraine. And as the CBC's Aaron Collins reports, the way he's bringing aid money in is by rocking out.
It's a music tour with a twist. This Canadian in Ukraine making music, hoping to make a difference too.
How do you say responsibility in Ukrainian?
Well, this school of rock is in a Lviv religious school. Its founder teaching bar chords and distributing aid provided by an Alberta charity, dropping off medicine, food, and a few tunes in the area.
We're taking it on the road to orphanages like every weekend. We went up to one last weekend to share music and bananas and chocolate with little kids.
Well, this city is far from the front line of Ukraine's war with Russia, but students here are still impacted by the conflict.
People dying, and actually my uncle was died last year. So, yeah, it's...
A little rock and roll providing a temporary escape.
They feel relaxed, they forget about it, They forget about their situation for a little bit.
The founder of Lviv's School of Rock and his students will take center stage this Friday. Headliners in a global online concert live streaming on YouTube to raise more money for people here.
Let's stay with Ukraine. They're our allies, and let's keep acting like that.
Musicians from London to Los Angeles and everywhere in between logging on to jam.
The whole community, grab hands and put this together to make a great event, to fundraise for these people and help all these people.
A reminder that even in dark times, spirits can be lifted one chord at a time. Aaron Collins, CBC News, Calgary.
Learning a little Leonard Cohen there. Awesome music. Thanks for being with us tonight on CBC Vancouver News at 6. You can watch this newscast on CBC Gem, our free app, as well as on YouTube and our website, cbc.ca/BC. Janella Hamilton will have your next local news at 11 o'clock, right after the National. Good night.